Okay, folks, let's get right into this. The winemaker's formula, as I call it, is it's not that difficult, but it does have a lot of parts to it. And I don't want to make this video too long because I know some people just don't have time to watch it. But basically, you want to make good wine, and you don't want it to be a well, maybe this will work type thing because it costs money to put all that stuff together. And I mean, what I've found is most people just want the mystery to be gone, and they want to be able to make wine sort of on autopilot. So there's basically only 5 steps to the winemaker's formula, and if you follow them, you're going to be fine. The first one is getting your starting conditions right. The second one is the processes and knowing what's going on during the fermentation, the primary fermentation, so that you can sort of check on it. The third step is the racking. That's moving the wine from one container to another. The fourth one is the processes that have to happen in the secondary fermentation vessel. And then, of course, the last one is the bottling of the wine and the aging of the wine. So let's get right into the first one, the starting conditions. The first thing is sterilization. Everything has to be clean. The acid has to be balanced correctly so that the wine doesn't taste too bitter. The sugar content and the types of sugars. First of all, the sugar content, the level of sugar has to be right. Do you want a dry wine? Do you want a sweet wine? And then the type of sugar, because you could actually use fructose or you could use glucose, where you can actually crack the sugar. It's called sugar inversion. And then, of course, the temperature. If it's too warm during your fermentation, if it starts out too hot, you'll have some bitter off flavors. And if it's too cold, it won't ferment at all. And then you really sort of got to plan out the entire process all the way from primary to bottling, and make sure you have the equipment before you start. So the second part of that was the fermentation process and the beginning of the fermentation. That's when you put your yeast in, and of course you got to make sure your starting conditions are right before you do that. And then the temperature for the whole primary fermentation process should be between about 70 and 78 degrees. And then if you're using pulp, some kind of fruit pulp, you're going to have a cap form, and you got to be sure and push that down. As far as stirring your must, some people think you ought to, some people say it's not necessary, but we'll go into that a little bit more later. Do you need an airlock during the primary fermentation? Well, most people say you don't, because the must is giving off so much CO2, and CO2 is heavier than air. There's several other things that go into the fermentation process, but we can save some of that till later. The racking part of it, you got to have the right equipment. Like, do you need a racking cane? What kind of hoses should you use? So, and that's something that you can decide. What about exposure to air? Now, a lot of people ask me this question. What if my wine gets exposed to air? Well, a little bit is okay. Not too much, and you could actually have, especially if you're making a white wine, you could have some oxidation take place, and you might be looking at some spoilage there, and your wine will turn brown. Do you need an automatic siphon machine, or can you just siphon it with your mouth? Well, that's up to you. I've never found any differences in the two. And then the lees, the dead yeast, when you're racking it over, do you need to take a little bit of that, or should you leave a little bit of that? And a lot of times that's taste, and a lot of time it has to do with the recipe. And what about wastage? Well, some people say I don't want any lees, so they leave a lot in the bottom of their primary fermenter, and then they end up wasting a lot of wine. So there's ways to get around that too. The secondary fermentation processes that go on. First of all, the biggest question I get is, how long do I leave it in the secondary? And bottom line is, you need to leave it there as long as it takes for what you want to have happen to happen. People ask me all the time, do I need to rack it over and over and over? Well, it depends on the clarification process and how it's working for you. The degassing, oh, my wine's going to have fizz in it. Well, it won't have fizz in it if you do the stabilization, which is part 5, and let it sit for quite a while and let a lot of the gas escape. But you can also apply negative pressure to the bottle, and you can suck out some of that gas that's in solution, and that'll take care of some of the degassing. There's several different ways to clarify your wine. I like gravity, and I've found the longer you leave it there anyway, the better it's going to be. So, of course, if you're making apple wine or something like that, the clarification process can take up to a year, or even mead, it can take up to a year to clear that stuff. So there's a lot of different chemicals you can use to speed the clarification process. And then, of course, stabilizing, all important. Stabilizing, you've got to put some kind of preservative in your wine to stop the yeast from multiplying, or you can let it ferment all the way till dry. If you started out with extra sugar, though, because you wanted a sweet wine, then, or if you started out with too much sugar, then you may need to stabilize it if you want your wine to be sweet. If you're trying to make a dry wine, then you want the specific gravity to start out at about 1.1 and ferment all the way until all the sugar's fermented. And a lot of people ask, well, how do I know it's done? Well, it's done when it's done, and that's just a matter of time and patience. So a lot of times people don't want to leave their wine in the secondary long enough, and they want to hurry up and bottle it, and that's just a big mistake. Lastly is the bottling and aging process. The first question I get is, well, should I let it age in the bottle or in the carboy, in the secondary? Well, my suggestion is once you know it's fermented till dry, or the fermentation process is stopped, that you just bottle it as soon as the gas is gone. And because I've always found that it ages better in the bottle, and I cannot tell you what complex chemical process happens in the bottle, but somewhere between 6 and 9 months in the bottle, the wine takes on an entirely different flavor. And again, I am not familiar with the chemical processes that go on, and a lot of research has been done into that, and I'll leave that to you to research further, but I've done a lot of reading on it, and basically it's sort of an unknown thing. What kind of corks to use? Well, the synthetic corks are gaining a lot in popularity. I prefer a regular cork. As far as how to store the wine, well, you always see wine in racks on their side. However, once you have bottled it, right after you first bottled it, what you want to do is store the wine for a while standing straight up, and that is just in case you still have some fermentation going on. That way the corks will pop out and go straight up, and the wine won't come out. So it'll save you from a big mess. After it's been standing upright for a couple of months, and you can see that you're not going to have corks popping out or anything like that, then you can probably lay it on its side. What about tasting it? Well, here's what I recommend. You want to taste it at 3 months, at 6 months, and at 9 months. And that'll take care of 3 bottles of your 25 if you started with 5 gallons. And then you'll have all the rest left, 22 bottles, and it should be at its height of flavor after about a year. So anyway, as far as air exposure, a lot of people that try to age wine in carboys run into this problem because it's difficult to keep the airlock on the whole time and leave it alone. People want to open it up and stir it and taste it and stuff like that, so you end up with a lot more air exposure. So to avoid that, that's another reason I recommend going ahead and bottling. So anyway, this is sort of the winemaker's formula, and it starts off, there's just 5 steps. Here they are: starting conditions, getting them right, the fermentation processes that are going on, racking the wine, the processes that go on in the secondary, and the bottling and aging. Now, if you have questions, I would love for you to post them below. I'd love to try and answer them. If you have comments, please post them below if you like this video. In the next video, what I'm going to show you is some of the biggest mistakes and some real disasters in the winemaking process. So be watching for that.